The Woman on the Train, a short story by Leanne Halyburton. Mum, the train's coming. Joe excitedly tugged on Christine's hand as he pointed down the track. See, it's just coming out the tunnel now. We'll have to be quick. It's going to stop, Joe, and it will wait until everyone's on. Don't worry, it won't leave without us. I know, he replied, adjusting his backpack. I'm just worried that there won't be enough seats. Look how many people are waiting. They might say that we can't all fit on. Christine rolled her eyes and straightened his cap. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, she mused. 10 years old and already he's a worrier, just like his mother. It'll be fine, she murmured. As the train pulled into the station, the awaiting passengers jostled forwards and Christine held firmly onto Joe's hand. However, manners mostly prevailed, and those alighting were allowed to do so before the impatient travellers piled up the steps and pushed through the doors, spilling out into half-empty carriages. Joe was like an eager little dog straining on its lead as he pulled Christine along behind him. Come on, Mum, quick, look, there's a seat over there, and it's got a table. Christine settled down opposite her son, smiling as he wriggled his arms free of the rucksack. See, I told you we'd be all right. Busy unfastening the buckles and opening the zip, he didn't respond for a few seconds. Finally, resting his elbows on the table between them, hands cupping his face, he sighed. Yes, I know, but you can't be too careful. She shook her head in response, once again wondering how that little old man had managed to take up residence in her son's body. Leaning back in the seat, head resting lightly against the window, she had to concede that she was at least partially responsible for the way in which her son viewed life. He was smart and sensitive, and appeared to be incredibly, aware. There was no other way to describe it. He seemed to understand that she and his father had been facing a number of uphill battles and struggles, even though they tried hard to keep it from him. And he worried about her, she knew that. Sometimes it almost felt as though he was the parent and she the child. It was so wrong, and it broke her heart. She knew that she was still grieving over the loss of the baby last year, and so was Gareth. But they avoided talking about it. She didn't want to upset him, and he didn't want to upset her, she assumed. And all that was said to Joe when she returned from the hospital was that the baby had decided to go back to heaven for a while. He asked a couple of questions before appearing to forget all about it, which made everything easier. And life just moved on, as if none of it had ever happened. Joe pulled a drawing book and pencils from the bag, followed by a small bottle of juice, and arranged them on the table. Don't forget you have a snack in there too, Christine reminded him. I'm just going to close my eyes for a minute or two, that's all. I won't be sleeping, so let me know if you need anything. I will, Joe replied, opening the book and selecting a clean page. But I bet you do go to sleep. Christine tutted. Don't be cheeky. I told you, I'm just resting my eyes. It'll be about an hour and a half before we get to Caston, so I'm just going to relax for a bit. I'll have a cup of tea once the train is on its way. 10 minutes later, her breathing had changed, and Joe knew for sure that she had dozed off. He wasn't surprised. She was always tired these days. She didn't used to be. She used to be full of energy, and they do loads of things together. Everything changed after the baby died. He knew that's what had happened, even though he acted as if he didn't. And Dad had to go away to work. She always looked sad now, even though she tried to pretend that she wasn't. He sighed and gazed around the carriage, wondering what to draw. Most of the seats were taken, and people were reading or staring at their phones or gazing out of the window. Nothing inspirational there. He decided to draw a picture for his dad of a motorbike. He knew how much he loved them, even though he couldn't afford one. In fact, he'd draw two, one for each of them. The train trundled on to the next station, and there was a bit of hustle and bustle as those getting off gathered their belongings and queued in the aisles, preparing to alight. They were quickly replaced by a new batch of travellers, and once again there was hustle and bustle as they found their seats and stashed their bags on the overhead luggage racks. Excuse me, young man, is this seat free? Joe suddenly realised that an old lady standing in the aisle was talking to him. He really didn't want to share the seat or the table with anyone else, and so he hesitated before remembering his manners. No, yes, no one is sitting there. Wonderful, she smiled, gratefully easing herself into the seat next to Christine. My feet are killing me. Joe put his head down and focused on his drawing whilst the lady rooted through her bag, finally placing a couple of things on the table. Polar mint? He looked up to see her holding a tube of sweets toward him. Go on, have one. It'll give you energy and help you concentrate. Feeling self-conscious, he wanted to say no, but that would have been rude, and so he took a mint and popped it into his mouth. She followed suit before relaxing into the seat, sighing contentedly. Suddenly, Christine began to snore. Very softly, but still, she was snoring. Embarrassed, Joe glanced first at her and then the old lady, his cheeks a lovely shade of pink. Oh, don't worry about that, she said in a kindly but no-nonsense tone. No one's paying any attention. She's just having a nice sleep, that's all. And it'll do her all the good in the world. Joe knitted his eyebrows together, wondering how this old lady knew that a good sleep would do his mum good. All the same, he relaxed, turning his attention back to his drawing. You're very good at that. Even though I'm looking at it upside down, it appears to be a motorbike. Am I right? Joe tried not to sigh. She was only being friendly, but he really wanted to finish the picture before they got off the train. He wanted it to be a present for his dad, and he had to get it just right. Yes, he said, I'm doing two, one for my dad and one for me. He loves bikes. Ah, I see. That's a lovely idea. Is it going to be a picture of one that he owns? Joe shook his head a little sadly. No, he can't afford one. But he likes to look at them, and he says that he'll buy one for me when I'm older, when I'm grown up. I'm going to buy one for him, but he doesn't know it yet. It'll be a surprise. The old lady nodded and picked up the tube of mints. Here, have another. You crunched the last one. I always like to suck them until they're really thin. Well, you never know, you might be surprised. Your dad might just find that he can afford a bike long before you've grown up. You never know. Stranger things happen at sea. You just have to have a little faith. Joe had no idea what she was talking about. Strange things happening at sea, so he didn't respond. She turned to gaze out of the window, watching as fields and trees flew by beneath a soft, heavy grey sky. He studied her face as she rolled the sweet around in her mouth, and for a second he experienced a flicker of recognition, which made no sense because he knew that he'd never met her before. She had bright but watery blue eyes and white hair that was a bit wavy. He kind of liked her cheeks. They had little red lines on them, making them look rosy. Her glasses were a bit weird, though. Kind of browny gold in colour with a sharp bit sticking out on both sides. She suddenly turned to face him, and he dropped his head, pretending to focus on the pad in front of him. His mother always told him that it was rude to stare, and he felt a bit embarrassed. So, where are you off to, you and your mum? He knew that she was trying to act as if she hadn't caught him watching her, and he was relieved. Caston. We're going to see my dad for a couple of days. He works there and can only come home once or twice a month. Ah, you're going all the way. I'll be getting off before that. So, this is a surprise for him then, she indicated the drawing. Yeah, I wanted to cheer him up, and he can put it on the wall where he's staying. You sound sad, young man, and I can see why, of course. I expect that he really misses you and your mum as much as you miss him. Still, I have a feeling that things are going to take a turn for the better, and maybe sooner than you might think. Joe knew that she was trying to be kind, but still, he really hoped that she was right. Both of his parents kept assuring him that it was only for now and that soon they'd all be together again. But they didn't seem very convinced. He added a few pencil strokes before turning the pad for her to see. She pushed her glasses further up her nose and leaned forward, carefully studying his work. You know, that's very good. Maybe you should add a smaller one for your sister. Joe was confused. I don't have a sister, he responded. The old lady sniffed and rooted around in a bag. Well, not right now you don't, she said, as she pulled out what Joe thought was a white cloth serviette. But you might have soon. You had a dream about her, didn't you? The boy was shocked, a little afraid even. How did you know? He stammered. It was true. Only last night he had dreamed that he had a little sister. She had reddish-coloured hair and green eyes, and she was bossy and a bit naughty, but in a nice way. When he woke up, he felt sad because it wasn't real. He decided not to tell his mum about it. It would only make her feel sad too. Oh, I'm an old woman, she told him, as she unfolded the cloth and removed her glasses, giving them a good clean. You know all kinds of things when you get old. It's one of the perks. Joe said nothing. He noticed that there were blue lines stitched round the edges of the serviette and that there was a large pink letter M in one corner. You know a few things too, don't you? She continued. Things that you don't tell anyone else about. You're an old soul in a young body, that's what you are, she chuckled. Joe swallowed hard and blinked. I don't know what that means, he said. But sometimes I do seem to know things, but I don't know how I know them. My mum says I've got a lively imagination, so maybe that's what it's about. I don't know everything, though, he added a little sadly. I wish I did. Oh, you don't want to know everything, I promise you. It wouldn't do you any good at all, she told him firmly, as she gathered her things together and buttoned her coat. My stop's coming up next. You're doing very well indeed, and your mother and father are very proud of you, as well they should be. Everything's going to work out for the best, mark my words. Anyway, it's been very nice to meet you, young man. You never know, we might see each other again one day. She leaned over and dropped a light kiss on the top of his head before disappearing into the little throng heading for the exit. Joe turned in his seat to watch her go, but she was nowhere to be seen. That was quick, he muttered, trying to ignore the lump that was forming in his throat. She was just an old lady, that's all. Stupid to feel that he would miss her. Still, she was nice and he'd enjoy talking to her. As the train eased out of the station, he craned his neck to catch a glimpse of the platform, intending to wave. But she was gone. He slumped back into his seat, feeling a bit sad, but excited too. He couldn't say why, but he'd believed her when she said that everything would work out for the best, and he had a strange feeling that something good was going to happen. Where are we, Joe? Christine suddenly stretched and rubbed her bleary eyes. I must have dropped off. Told you you would, he retorted with a knowing grin. You always do. Ah, shut up, know-it-all, she laughed, as she dragged herself to her feet and eased into the aisle. I need the loo, and I still don't know where we are. We just went through Wakeley, he replied, carefully pushing the drawing book back into his bag. Yikes, I'd better get a move on. Ours is the next stop. Christine finished her business and washed her hands. Pausing for a moment, she held onto the small basin for support and gazed at her reflection in the cracked mirror. God, you look tired, she sighed. You could carry spuds in those bags under your eyes. Still, pregnancy can do that to a woman. She wanted to be happy, she really did, and she was. But life was hard enough right now and she wasn't sure how Gareth would take it. Well, she did know how he would take it. He'd do what he always did and put on a brave face. He'd hug her and say it was great news and that they'd be fine, whilst, deep down inside, worrying more than ever. Ever since he lost the good job he used to love, the only opportunities to be found were miles from home, and all paying a lot less than he was used to earning. Although she'd found some part-time work, they were still only barely managing to cover the essentials. After the baby... Well, afterwards, Gareth had given away all of the items they'd collected, concerned that they'd serve as a painful reminder, especially to her. She gave a small wry smile as she ran her fingers through her slightly flattened hair. I wish we'd kept them all now, she whispered, reaching for the door. Did you have your snack? She asked as she dropped into the seat opposite Joe. No, I forgot, he admitted. I can have it later. Anyway, a lady gave me some mints to suck. Well, to crunch. I tried sucking them, but my teeth got impatient. Which lady gave you mints to suck? Christine demanded as she reached down beneath the table. And what's this on the floor? She came up with something square and white and blue and pink. Oh, that's her serviette, Joe exclaimed. She must have dropped it. This isn't a serviette, son. It's a handkerchief. A what? It's a hanky. Look. Christine unfolded the pristine cotton square and gave a little gasp of surprise. I recognise this. It's exactly like the one that I gave to my Grandma May when I was a little girl. I used my pocket money to buy it in a nice box from the draper's shop. They embroidered her first initial in the corner for me. Isn't that strange? And it looks brand new. Of course, it can't possibly be that one. I was only 7 when I gave it to her, and she's been dead for 20 years. How odd. Joe watched his mother gently run the tip of her finger over the letter, lost in thought for a moment. Suddenly, she looked up. What did she look like, Joe? And where did she go? She got off at Wakeley, he said, thoroughly confused. She had blue eyes and her hair was white and kind of bushy. Oh, and she was wearing glasses that had pointy bits on both sides. Sort of goldy brown. Why, Mum? What's the matter? Christine stared at him. Horn-rimmed specs, she murmured, before shaking her head as if to pull herself together. Mum, what? Joe persisted. You've gone all weird. She gave a little laugh and shook her head again. It's nothing, honestly. Just ignore me. I'm having one of my mad moments, that's all. Come on, we're almost at the station. Let's get to the door before everyone else does. Your dad will be waiting, all excited to see us. She folded the handkerchief carefully, as if it was the most fragile thing in the world, and tucked it into the zipped side pocket of her handbag. Joe was sure that there were tears in her eyes, but he knew that she didn't want him to see them. And anyway, she looked happy, not sad, which made him feel happy, even though he had absolutely no idea why. Maybe it was because they'd all be together again soon. Gareth was in checking mode. First his watch for the 10th time, then his wallet for the 3rd time, and then his appearance. His hair was getting greyer by the day, but he really didn't care. That was the last thing he was going to worry about, especially today. He couldn't wait to see Chris and Joe again. He'd miss them so much, and he definitely couldn't wait to tell them the news. He'd booked a table at the kind of restaurant that would have the blood draining from Chris's face when she saw the menu. But he'd let her sweat for a minute or two anyway. Just that morning, he'd received a phone call from his old boss, Kenny, offering him a new job 10 miles from home, with a salary that was almost twice as much as he was earning right now. When they hung up, with everything agreed upon, Gareth slumped into a chair and wept with relief. I know you and I haven't been the best of friends, God, but thanks a lot, mate. You've no idea just how much this is going to change everything for us. It emerged that Kenny had recently started his own business and, remembering just what a hard worker Gareth was, not to mention reliable, he was more than willing to make him an offer and to make it worth his while. I could do with you ASAP, to be honest. So how are you fixed? Gareth required no persuasion. The very first thing he did was to inform his manager that he was leaving at the end of the week, and the second was to book a table at that fancy place he passed every night on his way back to the shabby little bed and breakfast that had been serving as home for far too long. And, when the time was right, maybe he could even suggest to Chris that they try for another baby. If that's what she wanted, of course.